To those who are joining us locally, those who are joining us live, those who are joining us recorded after the fact, I want to welcome you. This is Impact 2020. We're here to speak about the community, the country, the current environment that we have going on right now. And today we have two guests, Christina, who is in Texas, Austin, Texas, and Damien, who is in Virginia, representing the Tidewater area in Virginia. And we're going to just go through and just discuss what's going on in our climate right now. This is truly an organic conversation where we don't kind of have rehearsed or pre-composed answers to these questions. We're just going to talk and have a nice general conversation. Also, if anyone has any questions, anyone who may be viewing and you want to have a question addressed, please type it into the comment section. So we're just going to jump right into it and get right into it. All right, yeah. Christina and Damien, appreciate both of you joining us today.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you for having me.
All right, let's just jump into it. So, first question. This started with police killing of Black women and Black men, and mostly unarmed Black women and men. And we've moved on to protest and calls for change and addressing injustice. And the reality of the matter is we've seen this before with Trayvon Martin, with Eric Gardner, Sandra Bland. We could go back to Rodney King even further. Christina, I'm gonna ask you first. Do you believe that this time is different? And if so, why is it different? And if not, what needs to be done to make it different?
I definitely do think this time is different, just mainly because I think the video was seen by so many different types of people, and it wasn't just Black people's, voices, right? There was you could actually watch this happen. And I think that affected a lot more people than just Black people this particular time. So I've actually been to a protest, and I wanted to feel the energy and to see and experience what was really happening. Mm-hmm. And in Austin, that protest was about 97% white people. And I think that's the main difference in what we're seeing right now is the group. I mean, Black people, we've always championed for ourselves, but now we have more people championing for us right now. And I think that's the main difference this particular time than the times before.
Damien, how do you feel? Do you feel like it's different this time, or do you feel like it's more the same?
I would echo Christina and say I think it is different. I think you do see a momentum of people, whether you're Black, whether you're white, whether you're Latino or Asian, that are coming together to protest this issue. Now, let's not get it wrong. We've had killings and beatings of Black men before. This goes all the way back to the 1800s. Then you think about Emmett Till, who was killed in 1955, and how that was brought up, and how years later on they realized that he really didn't even whistle at a lady who was white, but he was systematically bruised and killed. Killings of unarmed Black men and women have been historical. They've been pretty much as American as cherry pie, per se. With that being said, I think the difference is it was seen on tape, it was seen on video. It's not like other events haven't been seen, but now we're trying to hold people accountable. So I think with that movement, so far as defunding the police, of course, the Black Lives Matter movement, which is gaining a lot of momentum over the past few years, you see a change that this is not acceptable. When you look at the climate that we have or are having in this country, with the current administrator in office, and you see some of the attacks right here in Virginia and Charlottesville, you see how systematic racism and racism in general has been pretty much prevalent within our society. So the fact that you have these killings of Black men, unarmed Black women, and this was caught on tape where he couldn't breathe. Similar to Eric Garner, similar to Mike Brown with the hands up, similar to Trayvon, you see these killings of unarmed Black men, innocent Black men who did not get justice, and you see that we're tired of it. This is a rallying cry. Black Lives Matter. We are, and we continue to be, we are human beings. We are human beings. We are not 3/5. We are not one tenth of a man. We are human beings. So I think with this movement, people are coming together and seeing what's going on. I think this will hopefully elicit the change that we've been waiting for.
Yeah. Well, Christina, what do you think we need to actually do? What do we need to get accomplished? Some people say voting. Others say that we need to have more diverse people in different levels of leadership or power. Some people are talking about defunding the police. From your standpoint, from your vantage point, what do you think, and I'm not telling you to solve the whole world, but
Right.
What are some things you think we need to do to actually move the ball a little bit closer to the goal?
We need leadership. So we need a leader is what we need, and we need to organize. I think that's going to take momentum. When you have a momentous movement, right, you need to organize. Like, you need to have a plan, right? At least I think you need to have a plan. And I think that leadership, true leadership, authentic leadership, would really take this movement to the next level. Other than that, I mean, voting, absolutely. But like I said before, I think leadership would just really be the main thing I would like to see, to have some type of centralization of all this momentum. Like, we have momentum here across the country in different states and things like that, but to really take it and to focus that energy it could be one leader, it could be a few, but to really have someone that can help us organize this, right?
Mm-hmm.
Whether it be voting, and we could attack it from all angles, whether it be voting or attacking the systems and getting into the law aspect of it, and changing those things. I think that would really be the best course of action. Okay.
So Damian, let me ask you, do the protests help? Do you think, so we've been protesting for a little while. Do we need to continue protesting? Is it time to move to a different avenue? Where are we at with that? Do the protests help?
I think protests help because they bring to light the issue that, we as Black people and then even Americans in general are facing. However, there has to come to an end where we have to elicit some change. We mentioned voting. Voting is something that I think is just very critical. Voting, you get to elect the people who represent you, and not just on the national level, but even on the state level, and more importantly on the local level. When you're putting people in these positions of power, in these positions of leadership, they have the power to elicit change and advocate for the things that you and I may need. So there has come to me to the end where we have to want something. We are protesting a system and demanding change, and we have to gain that change. In order to effectively gain that change, you have to look at the voting. Brother Malcolm X said, the ballot or the bullet. He meant that if you were not given your rights to vote, then you have to take it by any means necessary. Now, obviously, we're in a different time now with the might of the U.S. military, so I'm not stressing violence. But what I am just stressing is that there needs to be a situation where we do demand some change, and the people you demand change from are the people you elect in office. There is such a stagnant when it comes to the halls of Congress. Once you're elected, it's very hard to get people out, and people are institutionalized in these places. Big business runs politicians, so to have people gain and grasp and get just a grasp of the situation, have people who know the people, who speak to the people, and who love and serve the people and do this genuinely, that will be beneficial. And that's where you get your Black leadership. That's where you elicit change. So we have to make demands, and we have to hold the people who are in these positions of power to block the things that you and I need, that they need to make these demands and adhere to these demands that the people are making.
That's a good point. Let me ask you this, and I'm going to ask both of you this. Christina, I'm going to go to you first. So one of the popular things, one of the popular things that's going on is these efforts towards removing different items. For example, the Confederate flag, removing monuments, taking Aunt Jemima off of the shelves in the grocery store. Some people think that this is good. Some people don't think that it's good. Some people think that it's a part of the whole entire cause, and other people think it's a distraction from what we really need to be doing. Where do you come down on this? Do you think that the monuments, the removing the flag, taking different Black faces out of the grocery store, How do you feel about those? Is it something that needs to be done, or is it a distraction?
So I think it does need to be done. Whether it's the most important thing that needs to happen, no. But I feel like symbols are important and they are powerful, right? Mm-hmm. So if they weren't powerful, they wouldn't matter as much. So taking the symbols down, I agree with that. I don't think they're the most important conversation right now. I do think they could probably have, I think the systems, tearing down the systems are more important. But when you take systems down, you have to take symbols down also. So whether what needs to come first, do I think the systems are going to come down first? No, I don't think so. I think it's easier to start with the symbol and then attack the system after that. Because once the symbol is gone, that will the system can fall after that because you don't have the symbol of power there. So I do think it's important that the symbols come down. But I think it's just like where we are. We're starting with what we can do right away to keep the momentum going.
And we have a question that popped up, buying black. How important do you think that is as a part of this whole entire movement?
It's crucial, essential to buy black. We have to support each other, period, point blank. We've got to, because if we don't do it, how do we expect anybody else to support us if we don't support ourselves? It is so important. And I stress that buy black whenever you can, even if it's not easy for you. If you have to go across town, you have to take a 30-minute drive or whatever, you better go. You better.
Yeah. And sometimes well,
that's right. You'll drive 30 minutes to go get that Michael Kors bag. You better drive 30 minutes to go support your local hair store or your black grocery store or the food truck, the black-owned food truck, or whatever you need to do. You need to buy black as often as possible.
Good one. Damien, I'm going to ask you the same thing. Let's start off with the buying black. Because I know you, and I know that's one of the things that you do. How do you feel about that? Go ahead and let people know. How do you feel about buying black?
I think it is critical and it is a must. In order to better our communities and in order for us to survive, we have to buy black. When you look at going back to Booker T. Washington, Marcus Garvey, and you go to looking at, a lot of the black nationalist movements, it's very critical that we buy black and support our institutions, not only black businesses, but HBCUs and other black institutions, so far as the church and our religious place of worship, whether it be the church or mosque. It's very important to buy black. In our community, the black dollar only circulates so much before it goes and leaves the hand. Where you go into other communities, it circulates 6 or 7 times. In our community, you go and look, and the people who own the institutions in our communities, they don't look like us. We give them our money, and they bring that bag of money, and they take it back home to their community. That is evident in black communities across this country. We allow anyone to come in our community. We allow anybody to come in our community and take over the economy of our community and the business in our community, and we don't have that. When we go to the grocery stores, when we're going to the laundromats, when we're going to just, the corner store, we are not, supporting people that look like us. When we go into our own communities, we are not even buying black. So this is very critical that we support black businesses. And not only that, but find a leeway so that we can have these businesses come into our communities, so then we'll be supporting one another. In order for us to advance, and in order for us to sustain our economic flexibility, we have to be able to support ourselves, and we have to be able to maintain our communities so that we can in strength. Your dollars do make sense. I take an example so far as the hair care industry, and as Sister Christine probably don't speak to this. You go to some of these institutions and stores, they're not owned, and it's $1 billion industry, and this is the black hair care industry, and a lot of us are benefiting from it. But even though it's geared towards us, you have other people benefiting from it. And when you go into these other communities, their communities are typically ethnic, and there's nothing wrong with that. You're supporting people in your own community, and we need to do that. We need to have that mind state. We need to have that sort of training and thinking that we need to buy within ourselves and support ourselves. So yes, we can drive 30 minutes to go support an institution. If I want to drive all the way up to Richmond to support a black business, that's what I'm gonna do. So we have to do that. It's just necessary and critical for our development.
All right. let's go to the tough question. We've had these protests for a while, and recently some tragic things have happened. In Atlanta, an 8-year-old girl was shot and killed as her mother drove around one of the barricades into a protest area because it was barricaded. So she drove around the barricade to drive out. That was the reports that was said. And an 8-year-old girl was shot and killed in Atlanta near where they were protesting Rashad Brooks's death. In Iowa, a 22-year-old woman was killed after she left the protest for George Floyd. She's walking away from the protest and bullets, a stray bullet hit her and killed her. There have been reports of people dying. And ironically, we're sitting here and we're protesting people dying. And at the same time, there are people dying. There really is no question to ask in the sense of a specific, but how do you rationalize that? What do you say to that? Christine, I'm gonna ask you first.
Well, I mean, it's tragic. Anytime you have loss of life, and especially in that way, in any way, it's just tragic and it's very sad. I can only speak to what I experienced when I've actually been to a protest and what I saw and what I felt while I was there. And I honestly felt safe and peaceful. And the people around me, even though they didn't look like me, most of them didn't look like me, they were my people. Like, they were there for me to protect me. And that was very powerful, and it stuck with me. Now, to the people those who have lost their lives being involved, going to or from a protest, or what I'd say to that is the people who are there trying to affect some type of change in the system are not there committing violent acts. They're not there, from personal experience. The ones who are there committing these violent acts are people there who are trying to sabotage what's happening. And I mean, I don't really know how you change, how you can stop something like that, other than by just, not being there, unfortunately, but we have to be there, right? And I hate to say it, but I mean, this is kind of a war. It's kind of like a war to break the systems that have systemically oppressed people for hundreds of years. And when you have that kind of drastic change in a short period of time, there's more than likely going to be some type of loss of life, and it's always going to be tragic, and it's always going to be unnecessary. But I don't think that. Do I think it's going to stop? I don't, and it's awful. But I think probably more people will get killed surrounding this, and there's always going to be bad people, and there's always going to be good people, right? Mm-hmm. And we just have to keep being vigilant in the face of evil and keep, trying to triumph against that.
Yeah. I know that's a tough question. So, Damien, I'm now pivot to you as well. How do you feel about the fact that people are dying as a result, or people are dying in relationship to these protests?
When you go back to those protesters in the civil rights movement in the 60s, and if y'all remember the movie The Butler, when they were actually training those individuals to go down there for the desegregation, the lunch counter facilities, Woolworth, and et cetera, I'm kind of going back to that movie. The one thing that stood out was when that they were training those individuals. One of the gentlemen who was in that movie, he stated to them that you could risk your life. It's a possibility that you may die. And I just think about that. And when they're doing these protests, we surely have to be vigilant. And that's, unfortunately, is one of the risks you sometimes take. The fact there are people dying, that people are willing to risk their lives for freedom and justice, and to get, what they feel is deserved and rightfully deserved. So their dignity, as human beings, as, people, as, people, God-fearing people, we're all God's children. So with that being said, that's the risk we sometimes take, and it's unfortunate. We don't want to see people die. We pray every day. We hope people can, get out of the situation. And there's people, whatever you're black or white, whatever you are, they're putting their lives on the line because they believe in something that's just big. When it comes to, saluting the American flag and the freedom and, what it represents, we want to make sure that all people have their piece of the American dream. And, I think when you are putting yourself, we talk about patriotism, that word has been tossed around and sometimes manipulated to fit a certain ideology. When you're wanting your rights and your dignity, people have always sacrificed their life for dignity. Going back to the founding of this country, going back to the Civil War, which was fought to keep an institution alive. When it comes to things people value and believe in, they will fight and die for it. And when it comes to the civil rights movement and the movement that's happening today with the unarmed killing of Black men and women, you see the same thing. It's unfortunate. And I know, we put a lot of people in that position, but it's one of those things where I respectfully say, brothers and sisters, that's the risk that people take, and they're willing to take it because they want to see wholesale changes.
Yeah, that's pretty good. I understand, that's a difficult question. It really is. And it's a difficult topic to talk about, especially when you're talking about people like the 8-year-old. I mean, she's 8 years old, 8-year-old girl. So it's tragic. I'm going to pivot a little bit, though. We're going to talk about the church. Historically, we know that the church has been out front when these type of protests, boycotts, rallies, whatever you want to call it. Historically, we've been out front. However, in this one, it's a little different. It's not the church that's out front. It is just organically individuals, young people, different organizations. It is not. My question to both of you is, what is the church's role, or what should be the church's role? Where should the church be at this time? Christina, I'm gonna come to you first.
I think having the church involved in the forefront is always, there's the civil rights movement was, built from the church. It came from the church. Sure. And I think there is some of that mirrored, a little bit of that mirrored in what's going on right now. I don't think we hear about it so much because I think the younger generation, I'd say, probably wasn't brought up in the church like our parents were brought up in the church, right? Like we were brought up in the church. I feel like there's a change with this generation. It's not, and maybe that's, kind of where we lost sight in the first place, not being that connected to God and being that connected to the church. I'm not saying I think the church is there. It's not at the forefront like it's been before. But I think there's room for the church to be more involved and come to the forefront of this. And I think that has a lot to do with leadership also. When you talk about some of the big names in the civil rights movement, they came from the church. That's where they came from. In this particular time, I think we lack that level of leadership. And I think that's a big part of that is because we don't have those big leaders in the church right now. Not saying they're not there, but they're not at the forefront this time.
Right. I personally think a lot of them are thinking about the whole prosperity movement, and this isn't prosperity movement. This is social justice. So some of them are in a bad place. They're out of place. They're out of their zone. They don't know anything about this.
Yeah. And I think we're on a learning curve. I think I don't think any of us kind of planned to see what's going on right now. And we're all kind of like trying to figure out what is our role, right? Where can I help? Where do I fit in? And I think maybe the church might be having that same conversation. Like, how can we make ourselves known? How do we, back this movement? And while I haven't seen, anyone's, come to the forefront, doesn't mean it's not happening also.
Yeah. Good point. All right. Time is moving right along. So we're going to have one last question that we're going to go into. Blackface. So historically, blackface was, theatrical makeup that was used when non-black people would dress up as black people, put on a blackface for performances. Most of these performances were satirical, and they were pushing along negative stereotypes. They used, in some cases, charcoal, grease paint, shoe polish to put on their faces, made their lips a bright pink, and they were negative stereotypes. That was the historical, and brief because the history is a little longer, but that was a historical standpoint. Nowadays, the 2020 version of blackface is any non-black person who dresses up as a black person, whether it be admonishing them or somebody dressing up as Michael Jackson because that was their favorite performer, or someone dressing up as, I don't know, somebody more famous now who's black, somebody dressing up as I don't know, Jay-Z because they like him, or something like a little white kid dressing up as that. They consider that blackface in the same negative fashion. So it's different from what it was. How do you feel about blackface? Is it what it is today, the 2020 version? Is it wrong anytime a non-black person wants to dress up as a black person, or is there some room for that? If for Halloween, my favorite basketball player is LeBron James, I'm an 8-year-old white kid and I just want to look as much as I can like LeBron James. Is that terrible? Is it not? How do you feel about that? Damien, let's go with you first. How do you feel about blackface, the current definition of blackface?
I don't accept the current nor the past definition of blackface. I think they're both wrong, they're unjust. It comes from an age where, blacks, we were not on film, we were not on TV, and, they were given these positions, and you had these, pretty much white actors dressed in blackface stereotypically, and pretty much that was the negative image they put. This blackface today, Brother Nate, and it don't even have to be white people dressing up as black people. You go to some of these reality shows and see stereotypes that are often being presented by people that look like us and often are still presented. So sometimes you even have to go outside, your community to find that being put on the media. It can be put on by people who look just like you and I, but behaving in a negative way. So you don't even have to have, what we call stereotypical blackface to go see negative images of us. And you think about, what's going on. I just remember working at an elementary school here down in Tidewater. And I just remember a young lady who was in 4th grade talk about what she saw on reality TV. And she saw a girl jump up on the table and go and smack somebody. And this is what they're talking about. And this is what we as parents, as community, are allowing our children to see. So we feed into these negative images that are being presented. So sometimes you even have to go outside your community to find a blackface. You can find it within your own community because you have people presenting these negative stereotypes. But it's unjust then as it's unjust now because there's a history and a story behind it. As African Americans and blacks, we've never been in positions of power where we can present these images. We've never been in positions of power where we can dictate or traditionally tell our own stories. You had to go to people in these positions of power, and they dictate these things. And oftentimes, the images that they present are negative. So it is as wrong then as it is wrong now. There's a history behind it. When I look at those images, it brings pain, it hurt. I think of my grandparents, I think of my great-grandparents before them, and I just think of all the hurt and pain that causes because they're pretty much making a mockery and they're presenting this image of us, which is not true and is not accurate, and it is tired, and I would never support that.
That's an interesting point.
We don't see us, going around.
Yeah, that's a really interesting point. So, Christina, I'm asking you though, there's different scenarios when different people play different people. Say, for example, and it's not in a negative light. Say, for example, when they had Peter Pan, it was a young woman for some of the theatrical Peter Pan plays. It was a young woman who would dress up and play Peter Pan because Peter Pan was a young boy, and they couldn't. You didn't have a young boy who was mature enough to do the whole play, and the young woman's voice was able to be a characteristic of a young boy. And so, in that situation, it's not, woman disrespecting men by dressing up as that. If it's not a disrespectful thing, it's something of, you know, you're looking up to someone, or you're dressing up as someone not to be disrespectful. Is it okay, or is it still bad? How do you feel?
I think, I mean, honestly, can't find fault in a little kid dressing up in one of their role models' outfit, right? I can't find a disrespect in that. I honestly can't find that. And I do think that blackface does. I mean, some people take it a little far to where, like, you can't even, for Halloween or something like that, you can't dress up in your hero's outfit or whatnot. Now, do you need to paint your skin black? No, you don't. Just like Black people we don't paint our skin white to dress up, or something like that to imitate or wear a costume. If you're doing the historical view of blackface where you are imitating in a derogatory manner, dressed up as a Black person, then no, I do not agree with that. And I do think there is room to be able to, have costumes and things like that and still be respectful. Absolutely.
Yeah. Well, I want to say thank you to both of you for coming on. Our time is gone. It's always too short. Hopefully you will join us again. Christina, Damian, thank you so much. This is Impact 2020. Please join us again next time. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
All right, yeah.